Good morning, friends. Welcome to OBE Journal 2017. And let's keep our fingers crossed that this is number 27. I think it is. And if I'm wrong, the numbers will be corrected later. I feel that we should have for those of you that may just be not plugging in sequence, a reminder of statement of purpose here, and that is basically how shall I say, a correction or an addition to what I've perceived is most people's experience that are either consciously engaging in this activity or finding themselves in the middle of it once in a while. Most people discover that their lucid dream or their consciousness out of body occurs, how shall I say, just once in a while. Might be once a week, might be once every 3 weeks, might be once every 6 weeks. But it had, including myself, and prior to 2017, this experiment. But I had the strong notion from a variety of sources that we go out of body every night. We just don't remember it. And there's a variety of reasons for why we don't remember. I think one of them is just the increasing one's level of consciousness, whatever that means to you, or lucidity, as the dreamers will say, lucid dreamers, to the point where you're actually conscious of what you're doing and remembering what you're doing. It's quite possible to be out of body floating around in an unconscious state. For example, Bruce Moen talked a lot about this in one or other of his books some years ago about being on various programs organized and taught at the Monroe Institute in Virginia. And I think, one of them was Exploration 27, and another one maybe had another name. But he would talk about investigating certain locations and sets of experiences in the spirit planes, Focus 27 mainly, whereby he'd be doing something and reporting on it, and then would notice that there would be a crowd of people, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 people, following him around a sort of a distance, and to experience what he was experiencing, but they didn't seem to be conscious. They seemed to be, well, I don't know if you'd say half asleep, but certainly not fully conscious. And then there would be other people in his program, the 6 or 8 or how many people were in the program that day, that week, that he would interact with. They would appear and they discuss what they were experiencing and say, well, I'm over here doing this, and he'd say, well, I'm over here doing that, and yada yada yada. And the 8 or 12 unconscious people, or however many there was, would be seemingly absorbing this, but in an unconscious state, and he just sort of got used to it. So that was one example of that. And another example is people that you might meet when you're out of body in your own neighborhood, earthly neighborhood. Lots of people do that, float around, and you'll run into people, that other spirits, people out of their body, that can communicate with you, and then others that won't. They'll just sort of stare at you, and uncomprehendingly, if you like, and so there's that. And of the people that speak to you, quite a number will not remember. If you see them again, the next night or the night after, they won't remember. or they might. I mean, it varies, you know. So there's some examples of levels of consciousness that you will meet outside the body, and then there's your own memory, your own consciousness. Um, so this experience that many people have of large gaps between one experience and another. People will talk about going through a dry spell, and then we'll speak of being, excited because they had an experience. I suspected for the longest time that was a sort of a cover story that consciousness would give because the individual involved was indicating on some level that they weren't ready to be conscious every night. Just in the way that the people that never seemed to be conscious would be giving a signal, inward signal, that they weren't ready to be conscious at all. And I've certainly had experiences of teaching people certain things, facilitating certain experiences, whereby people are ready for some, shall we say, psychic experiences, but not others. I've met people that are interacted with people, I mean, here on the physical plane, that are ready to, experience past lives, but they're not ready to experience talking to the dead. That freaks them out, and they're not just they can't do it, or they won't do it, or they say, "Oh, I don't think I'm ready for that." So there's a lot of things that you can experience, and some of them you will reject out of hand as being too much for you, or too weird, or too frightening, whatever. And I believe now that the whole notion that you can be conscious every time you go out of body, which is for most people is every night, and that includes people that just float up out of the sleeping physical body and hover. A lot of people do that. You hover in your astral body, sort of asleep, but it's very restful and rejuvenating because you seem to be able to absorb astral vibrations better when you're floating up here. And then you're just going to float back in when it's time to get up. And some people float up and sit on the chair in the bedroom or sit on the side of the bed and just sort of sit there. And then, go back into the body because either they don't want to go out of the bedroom or they haven't got a notion that they can go out of the bedroom. So the same applies to that level. So in this series of nightly explorations that I sort of give here, last, we're up to about 3 weeks now, I'm trying to overcome that and show that we go out of body every night, and to some degree or other. And we just, for our own reasons, choose not to remember it. And there was another example of this in one of Bruce's books where he's doing exploration at one or other of the, I don't know what you'd call them, places of knowledge and wisdom that are on dealing with a number of aspects and of our life there and here and how they interact. And they're like little museums, institutions, places where experiences and objects and ideas and archives are gathered. They have different names. And he was exploring one with other people, and I think it was like the Hall of Good Ideas or something he called it. And there was various people sort of helping out there, helpers. I think they called them consciousness workers. And he was asking his way around, and the worker, said, "Oh yeah, you need to do this and go here and do that." And just like you might be in a museum and ask for a direction to a certain wing, and he introduced himself, and at some point in the conversation, he it became apparent that he thought it was the first time he was there, and the person he was dealing with said, "Oh no, you're here all the time." And he says, "You're often here looking for fresh ideas and fresh inspiration." And Bruce was amazed because he didn't remember being there before. And the guy was almost equally amazed, or maybe he was faking it because um, that people don't remember these things, although they come to certain places quite often. So this tallies in with things I had read when I was exploring this myself years and years ago in the old spiritualist literature. When I say old, I mean anything that's 50 to 100 years old, and there's a lot of it. Um, that is more concerned with just uh, astral visits to and contacts between people that know each other, family members, beloved family beloveds, and there's many references to people who are, the dead, the permanently dead, and who adjust to the fact that the souls that know them that come to visit don't remember their last visit, and they just sort of they deal with that, But there's a lot of references to it. So this is an attempt to build a bridge across that river of forgetfulness, and to show that even if you don't remember lots of your experiences, they're still happening, and to provide some sort of inspiration for you to pursue your own journeys with that in mind. So I'll get ready to project here, and I'm pursuing the method I call almost instantaneous transfer, and it might be new to some of you, but it's the same instantaneous transfer that you can do when you're agile on the astral plane and go from one geographical location to another. And you just do it by once you've learned, it's just a little trick basically. Um, you do an instantaneous transfer. You don't travel. You're at one place, and then you're at another by desire, by design. And those places can be 300 yards apart or 300 miles apart. It doesn't matter. And once you've figured out how to do that, it's quite easy. So it's the same. Really, it's the same here. Now the level of consciousness when you do that instantaneous transfer is up to your experience and what you're ready for and what you want. So understand that whatever you're experiencing is because you're allowing yourself to experience that level, and that there are other levels that you're not either don't feel that you're ready for, or don't know about and can't access. Of course, as I've joked, I emphasize the access all areas pass. There is no area that you're not equipped for and allowed to. You just think there is. And I had known years ago, just for example, that I was out of body a lot. I wrote about it in More Adventures in Eternity about 12, 13 years ago. And just led my life with that knowledge, and felt that knowing about it every night would disturb my day-to-day stability. And it does if you have ecstatic experiences, particularly. And ecstatic experiences are easily accessible on the astral plane, and you being ecstatic in paradise, and knowing that you are, can be troubling to your day-to-day emotional, psychological stability. So I had felt that it was better that it was, not there. And just for that ability to function normally in society or function acceptably in society. So that was my excuse. And in this series of exercises, I'm circumventing that and showing myself the variety of experiences that I'm going through, or that some version of me is going through regularly. And I'm coping with it so far. The high vibration at the beginning around chapters 1, 2, 3 were quite affecting to me. I felt very speedy the first day I did it. The first couple of days, very, very speedy. And things seemed to be on my physical plane life very fast. And I was just going to work and doing what I normally do, but there was things happening very quickly, and I felt, a high vibration. And I seem to have harmonized with that high vibration now, and I may just look and talk like, a regular guy at this point. But I did have a period of adjustment for sure. I got an email from somebody yesterday who talked about their experience of earthbound ghosts, which was extremely vivid. And if this person gives me permission, I will read from it, maybe tomorrow. Just an example, people are emailing me, and I would encourage you, if you have things you want to share, please do so. And because I know more of you are experiencing things than just the handful that have emailed. So, and as I do this, I seem to experience some level of psychic contact with those that are following along. Not sure how that is accomplished, but I'm just letting you know I do feel that. It's not an intimate thing. I can't say I follow every one of your individual lives. It's not anywhere near that intimate. But I do get notions that seem to be transferred to me psychically. And that's not necessarily because you're listening right now. Some of you will listen or watch in a few hours or in a day or two, or whatever. But you're contributing a sort of energetic fingerprint as you follow this closely, and somehow or other I pick up on some version of that. And what I'm getting is some of you are following this and projecting out into, whether you're following it at any, it doesn't matter what time of day you're following it. When you're tuning in, and you might be sitting in an armchair or lying in a bed, or, some people might even be listening in their cars. I think even somebody did say that. They somehow transfer it to, I don't know, maybe a CD or something. I'm not quite sure what they do. And listen to it in their cars, which I find interesting, as it's a very sort of meditative thing. But it's not for me to criticize how you do it or assess how you do it. Not at all. But some of you are, I'm getting, projecting out into the room that you're in while you're doing this. And maybe knowing that you're projecting out into the room, and you are going farther, but your consciousness lowers as you go farther away from your body. And I just point that out, and maybe you can work with that. It's, for me, this is just an observation that I've been given to pass along to you, and suggest to you that you do with that information what you feel is appropriate. But that's what I'm being given. And I add that this is what you're doing while you're sitting there. You're not asleep, you're sitting there. So this notion that you have to be in a certain place, a certain level of relaxation in order to do this is, I believe, another belief system that you have to push through. And I remind you of Bruce Moen's story here. There's Bruce again. He's wonderful for examples. I think he's got 5 different books out. And That's Brucemoen, Bruce Moen. Um, and he talks of many, many experiences. And all his books are extremely good learning tools, I would add. And that's why you see me referring to them all the time. And, he's very good at pointing out levels of consciousness and having to shuck various belief systems as you move along. And when I say belief systems, I'm talking about even basic assumptions that you take with you that you don't think about till you realize those assumptions are dictating some of your experience or the level of your experience. And one of those is thinking that you can't do an exploration or a retrieval while you're sitting in a restaurant having dinner. And he opens his first book with that story, which I read from a few episodes ago. So I sense myself projected into one of those lovely parks that are in seemingly all of the astral cities. Well designed, close to areas of busy human interaction and activity, and easy meeting places, shall we say, and places of relaxation. I'm sitting on a bench by myself, but there is human activity close by. People are moving around in singly, groups of two, groups of three. Dressed fairly normally, in a variety of outfits, casual and not so casual. And eventually, it's my experience that, people are polite; they'll leave you alone if they feel that you want to be left alone. And but there's seemingly a slight difference in the how shall I say, the aura of my radiance, because apparently when you're projecting from a physical body while you're still alive, you will have a slightly dimmer radiance, shall we say, that they can pick up on. And so they very quickly sense that you are, projected out of body, and will how shall I say, deal with you appropriately. Or they will, that's not to mean they won't be polite or whatever, but they will understand. In this park, there is a sort of fine gravel paths that go around. And I'm getting, as I focus on that and watch people go by, that not all parks are this, but some have, and they were designed by other spirits who like that nice crunchy sound that you get when you walk on gravel. Although it's slightly diminished there because your astral body is lighter, less dense, and has a tendency to almost float along the ground. You do touch, but it's a lighter touch. And But I'm noticing the gravel, not all parks have that. Some of them have grassy paths, and some of them have this smooth, rubbery sort of dark rubbery thing that replicates, asphalt that you might get in some parks, but it's much softer and much more giving, like smooth, thick rubber. I'm not saying it is rubber, but it kind of feels like it. And as I say, there's various people passing by, strolling, relaxed, just like they would be on Earth, really. Um, Perhaps a little more joyful. There's nobody that's somber or, yeah, saying somber is a good word. You might see people in a park that they're obviously troubled about something, and they're thinking it over, and they look sort of, a little withdrawn and somber as they worry whatever issue is, attracting them. You don't see much of that here. You do see some of it. People will sometimes fret about the grief that their loved ones on earth are feeling while they're reasonably happy in spirit. And if they go back and visit, as people do, as souls do, if you like, they re-experience that grief, and it's not pleasant for them at all. And as many other psychics have said, try not to grieve too much or too long, because it does affect those of the dear departed and makes their existence, a little more troubling than it needs to be. So always try to keep that in mind, whether it's, your brother or your granddad or your best friend from high school. What they need from you is serenity, joy, acceptance, love. That's what they'd like. They don't always get it. And of course, there's many dysfunctional families where people don't get along, can't stand each other. So they have different needs. They're not expecting that from you because they feel they didn't get it from you, on Earth. And why would they get it now? And there's a variety of things, but generally, for a lot of souls, that is what they would like. So someone has sat down next to me in her usual cheery, almost cheeky sort of way. This is someone that I know reasonably well, and was a living partner of a friend of mine, and who is passed on from in late middle age from an illness that was known to be happening. One of those illnesses that almost always take you away in a matter of months. But I had sensed that she had transited quite quickly and quite well, and in terms of not getting stuck anywhere, meeting up with a relative of hers and being led away. And this is also someone who considered, I was told by her spouse later, the disease progressed rather rapidly at the end and took her away, but she had considered seriously. And it must have been some months ago, because the right to die legislation here in Ontario had been passed at that point, and or very close to being passed. And one can do it legally here. But she had thought very much of going to Switzerland, as they say, and you know why people go to Switzerland. So I think was very, very ready to make a transition. Anyway, she's sitting next to me now after a couple of brief contacts after she passed, and this meeting was arranged ahead of time, as things often are. and arrangements that I make for the purpose of this series of programs um, are done by me and then forgotten until it actually happens. And I think also word gets out that Gord's projecting and doing this and doing that, and if you want to contact him, there he is, sort of thing. And it's all known by all the spirits, including the famous ones, JFK and who was it, Krishnamurti that we talked to in the last few days. They know what's going on the internet. They know what the internet is. Yada yada yada. So this friend of mine, a longtime friend, and I say a spouse of another good friend of mine, wants to say hello to everybody, and would like to communicate what a marvelous time she's having here in the afterlife. And she's telling me in words of her own that she's fully engaged in a number of activities, including hobbies that she was going to do when she fully retired. She was on the point of retirement when she got ill, and had plans of things that she was going to do in her retirement. And those plans got stymied, of course, and she was annoyed about it for quite a few months, and because she felt just prevented, held back, redirected against her will. And it took her, what's she saying now? It took her a long while to realize that this is what she wanted. And she didn't have any conscious understanding of the wonderful, fulfilling nature of life in the afterlife, and so was rejecting that. And but inwardly, she said she slowly learned to accept it, and she feels now that she learned to accept it from going out of body in her period of illness when she would be asleep or doped up, as she was in one of those situations where morphine and various other drugs of that nature made her day-to-day pain bearable, but also made her dopey, as we all know. But she said she was having these out-of-body experiences and coming to various parts of the afterlife, and not necessarily remembering it much, only the vaguest sort of things, vaguest sort of dreams, if you like. And but they did, the material of those dreams, seemingly fantasy, barely remembered fantasy, modified her attitude over the months until she was inwardly accepting rather than inwardly rejecting. And she's teasing me about as she's talking to me, and don't forget, this is somebody I've knew for like 20, 30 years. She's teasing me about putting all her words into fancy language. And she knew I was what I did with my life and my writing and my experiences. And she was a great, we were close enough that she could tease me quite regularly, and I was quite happy with that. The way that old friends do, And she's saying to me, she has friends here that she didn't even know about, that are, other dead family members and friends, none of whom I know particularly. For me, it was a situation where, I visited my friend and his spouse, and we had dinner together, went to concerts, that sort of a thing. And I only minimally met some other members of her family once or twice over the years, and never got, in any way close to any of them. So she's explaining this situation whereby I've got friends here that I knew before I was born that I completely forgot about, and that's quite the revelation apparently. And I'm assuming these are people that choose to stay in the astral much more than average, and don't don't really like incarnating physically that much. And she's saying yes, I think so. And so that's quite a joyous discovery for her, she tells me. And also, she lives closely to some other family members, like not next door, but close. Um, People that passed on before her, and it's a large family, and there's lots of people that I don't know about at all. And but she's sort of wants to emphasize that, and telling me she's adjusted quite well, or feels that she has adjusted quite well, and loves dressing because you can, on one level, you can access any type of fashionable clothing you wish in a fair exchange kind of manner. There's places like consignment shops, she says, where people hand in their used clothing, and it gets sold for a percentage, and the seller gets some, and the original owner gets some, and you get a good price on the clothing. And she said there's lots of that here, although it's more exchange. There's no exchange of money. And she was a very stylish dresser here on Earth, and I'm not surprised to hear that. And so she just wanted to mention that there's um, for those who like fashion and being smartly dressed, she said this is just the place to be, and she really likes that aspect of life there. And she is quite smart, sitting next to me now, but then she always was, and I understand that about her and accept it, of course. So what else? She does regularly visit her her spouse, and still regards him in that way. They're still partners as far as she's concerned, and they're separated, and but she's quite happy to wait for him. Let's put it that way. And she's not putting any time limit on it or not making any predictions. And I'm glad to hear that because he's a good friend of mine, and I don't particularly want him to pass on just because she's passed on, as some couples do. Um, but obviously that's a selfish thing. If people choose to do these sort of things, that's their business. But we're all a little selfish on these matters. If we love someone, we don't want them to be gone. We want them to be, accessible. And I can be just as bad at that as anybody. Even though I fully understand that you can access people in the afterlife without too much trouble. And I've certainly been in various life situations where, spirits of, my dead friends will join me for a few moments, and in a number of experiences. Some have been in a car with me as I'm traveling along, just pop into the passenger seat and say hello. It's quite funny. And others have, I felt, joined me at various concerts I've been at. They'll just kind of sit next to you, and you'll sense that they're there. And then they'll leave after a few minutes. They just want to be sharing for a little while. And uh, obviously, this woman is doing that with her former spouse. She joins him on a number of occasions, and is just there for him. And of course, realizes that he doesn't always know consciously that she's doing this. But I've mentioned it before to him, and he's paid slightly more attention to it. And it takes a certain level of focused sensitivity to feel this sort of thing. And it can be, in the early stages of postmortem experiences, um, that can be difficult to handle and tear-inducing, to say the least. And so she understands that, but feels that he'll get over it. And I can remember one situation when she came here, spoke to me briefly, and asked to pass along a message. And this is some months ago, and I said to her, "Well, I'm not sure if he's ready to hear this." I said, and she sort of chastised me and said, "Oh yes, he can handle it. Sure he can." And almost in the way that a wife would say anything about her husband. "Oh yes, he can do that. Sure he can. Don't worry about it." So that was how she portrayed herself in that situation some months ago, and I recognized the very sort of basic sort of human understanding that she was giving me, the sort of thing that only long-term friends and spouses would say of each other. And so I give you that as an example of how, even though there's been a radical change in this person's life and their experience of their relationship, there's still a lot that's still the same. There's a lot of human character and personality and behavior patterns that are just the same. And as you pursue your own experiences, you'll see that, and you'll learn to distinguish with, okay, this is different, but this is just the same. And it can be quite amusing to find out the things that are just the same. People's cultural activities are often just the same. I'm not sure what this lady's doing, but she's saying, she's been to art galleries, she's been to concerts, she's been to fashion shows, more than she was on Earth. That seemed to be something she wanted to do on Earth, but wasn't in the right place at the right time, or whatever. And what else is she telling me? Taking art classes, I believe. I don't know if she did that here on Earth. I don't recall it. And she said, a lot of socializing. And she was a great, sociable person, and I can fully understand why she likes that. And I should, emphasize that to the rest of you. Think of all the time you spend socializing right now in your physical plane life, just regular day-to-day socializing. Whether you're standing in line somewhere, chatting to a stranger, about weather, about politics, whatever, or hanging with old friends, going out for lunch, the vast amounts of socializing that guys do when they play golf, for example, all this goes on there. And it's just a replication. If you enjoy it, you'll keep doing it. And so she's mentioning that. And what else is she telling me? She said, "Well, I don't have to tell you this, Gordon. You know all this." And I go, "Yes, but it's important that you're communicating it and people are hearing that." Because people don't just want to hear about my experiences and my thoughts; they want to hear about others. So I'm thanking her for taking the time and effort to sit down and communicate. And I'm very glad to say that she's resumed her look of youthful beauty and radiance that, of course, she lost in her period of illness. And it's she always was quite the little radiant sprite. She was someone of small stature, and but very sort of full of full of the joys of living, as they would say in Scotland where I grew up. And it's a great pleasure to see her that way again. I'm very happy to see her that way. And I thank her for all of this, and ask her if there's anything else that she'd like to communicate. And she's saying, tell people that it's every bit as wonderful here in the spirit world as they may have heard. That it's not fantasizing, It's not some kind of a PR sales job. It's just wonderful. And she can't even begin to describe all the marvelous things about one's, regular experience there. She says the colors are amazing, much more intense, much more subtle. There's colors here that you just don't see on Earth, and I think she's talking about colors generally, whether it's clothing, nature, architecture, and I mean she is right. It is quite amazing. Um, you look at certain colors and they seem to morph slightly into various shades of themselves. How can I put that? You know how you go to a paint store and you look at the little examples of the colors of paint, and there's maybe 10 all in the same color but different sort of textures and shades of that color. A bit like that. Except you're not looking at paint samples, you're looking at the color of a wall. And as you look at it, it sort of morphs into various, subtly, I'm not talking something that goes from red to green and back again, but the various, shades of green, say. And it sort of subtly undulates in those different colors the more you look at it. And things like that. And certainly the colors of flowers, trees, grass, plants are all marvelously subtle and manifesting various shades and textures that you just wouldn't see here on Earth. So I know she's referring to all that sort of thing. She's stopped as I babble on here, and she's giving me that little look of, yeah, oh, you just can't shut up, can you? And I laugh. Yeah, she's right, I can't. And so yeah, many wonderful things about life here, and she urges people to look forward to this. And she said, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's a marvelous life, and you get to live the way you want. And there's none of this, well, we can't do this because we haven't got the money this year, and that sort of a thing. And she and her spouse, they did travel quite a bit and enjoyed it. And she continues, she said, I'm still doing it because it's so much easier here. And little day trips, she's saying. So obviously she's learned to project to various places and come back again. And so I said, it's wonderful to see that you're just the same old person, dear. And I give her a big hug. And she says, and you're just the same too. And which I am. I haven't changed hardly at all. So I thank her and say, okay, I'm going to be leaving now, dear. And we'll obviously hook up some other time. And thank you so much for your contribution. So let me just focus. She sits back and sort of just waits for me to disappear. And she knows that's what I'm going to do, and I do it. And I'm drawing my consciousness back to the body here, and here it comes. I mean, obviously I'm conscious here, but bits of me were out there, and I'm just pulling them back. And here they come. And if you think this is remarkably easy for me to do, I would just suggest allow yourself to do it. And don't project the seeming impossibleness of the whole operation onto me. It's entirely doable. And not only is it easier than you think, it is accessible to all. And I urge you to overcome whatever belief system you've adopted from books that you've read, or lessons that you've taken from instructional CDs or courses that you may have taken. All the assumptions of rolling out of your body or reacting, waiting for the vibrations to start, all that sort of thing. That not that they're not real and true, they are, but they're not the only way of doing things. And when you project your consciousness from a seated state, a meditative state, as others have done, not just me, and the level of intensity of your projected self may not be as, how shall we say, as emotionally intense as you would like it. But I urge you to accept that there are various ways of doing this, and that what I'm teaching here by example is one way. And I'm teaching it because I believe strongly that it's the way forward. Other methods are just as good. I'm not putting down anything. But what I'm saying is if you want to overcome that sense that, oh, I only have experiences once a month, or, I have these dry spells, and I know people find them frustrating, I'm urging you to try this method to overcome that sense of dry spell and to access multidimensionality regularly and see it as part of your being and not something that's a gift. Well, it is a gift, but not something that's a gift, a once a month gift or a once a month treat or whatever. It's something you can do every day if you put aside the time, just as you can do anything if you practice it every day. Any creative activity at all. Try to see it on that level, because it is on that level. And with that, I wish you farewell.